Today to introduce Michael Landrut. He's President and CEO of RDU, and also Howard. He's a Vice President with the consulting firm. And it's going to be a very, very interesting session. And let me thank you, Steve, for arranging this. Steve has an immense major part to play in getting this event going. So thank you, Steve. Steve is our HSNC man. On behalf of HSNC, I request you to give a bouquet to Michael and welcome you. Also to Howard. So thank you so much, and I'm going to hand it over to Steve now, who's going to take this program further. Welcome to HSNC.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming to HSNC. I want to thank HSNC and NCAIA for hosting this, and I want to welcome all of you to the #1 place to live in North Carolina, Morrisville. And I want to thank our Mayor Pro Tem Liz Johnson for being here, Martha Page, our town manager, who's in the audience. She's the one that gets a lot of things done for Morrisville, and of course, Satish Garamella, who's doing a lot of great things for our town and our community, and he's going to be on the panel in a few minutes. What I wanted to say today is, before I introduce Senator Chaudhary, who's going to say a few words since he has to leave early. I think it's critically important. I think we all know why we're here. The huge growth, the explosive growth of our community. Just a few days ago, on the WL Tech Wire, I wrote some of the numbers I got from the census that we have about 57,000 plus Indian Americans in the Triangle, including Wake and Durham, about 51,000 plus in Wake, and about 19,000 in Cary. I see many of you from Cary. And 47% of our population is Indian. And I see a lot of people in the technology community here. And, we talk about digital transformation a lot, but I always call it democracy transformation if you look at what our community's done. I just want the guests to know, it's been obviously with the great work that Satish and Senator Chaudhary and others are doing with me, we've got the political transformation and many others will follow. We've got the cultural transformation where we welcome you to Morrisville to watch our cricket, where we have minor league championships. Let's hear it for cricket in Morrisville. We're doing great. Bollywood performances. You could start your day with India and end your day with India, so it's truly a transformation and we're seeing impact, and hopefully you can come back to this temple and celebrate with us. And then finally, the economic ties, the jobs that we're creating. I know Ryan Combs is going to talk a little bit about this, but the bottom line is Infosys promised 2,000 jobs. They're well on their way. EDPNC created an office in Bangalore, India to recruit investment. Bharat Forge is invested hundreds of millions in an aluminum plant in Lee County, and of course HCL and Cary. And India is the 5th largest economy in the world, in addition to being the world's largest democracy. So this connection is so great. So I want to thank Michael Landrut for coming today out of your busy schedule. I know you can attest that I'm a hard guy to say no to. I can be pretty persuasive, but I appreciate you taking time and coming with your team. And on that note, I'm going to ask, and I want to also recognize the Sharma family. They're the founders of the HSNC. Dr. Sharma and Mrs. Sharma, thank you for being here. So tonight, we're going to hear about the airport. We're going to hear from the airport on what are the criteria for international flight service and what can we learn in terms of moving the needle and how can we potentially make it happen and what do we need to know. But with that being said, I do think it's important to bring up, before we go on with the program, Senator Chaudhary, who's no stranger to this community. He's the minority whip of the Senate. Just a few days ago, weeks ago, he was recognized as Legislator of the Year. He's given a lot. And the thing about, I call him Jay, but the senator, is that he's in it for the right reasons and he leads with purpose. And I think that's why he's doing such a great job for all of us and for the great state of North Carolina. So with that being said, I want to have the senator come up and just give us a little perspective from the state.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for your leadership in putting this panel together. I am very excited to hear what some of our takeaways are going to be. Let me just say a couple things, because I'm going to have to leave around 7 o'clock to be at a candidates forum. But you know, one thing is the first Indian American elected to the North Carolina General Assembly. It was important to make sure, as Steve kind of talked about, that we had a place at the table, and we've been able to do that. We've been able to now have an annual Diwali proclamation done by the governor. We've seen Diwali as a teacher workday now here at Wake County Schools. As Steve has said, really with the work with the Economic Development Partnership, we have Vimal Kalapa, who's on the board here. We were able to successfully recruit Emphasis, and with the work with Ryan Combs, we were able to work as a community. Ashok Abikumar, who was there in the event that he hosted at his house, we were able to bring Bharat Forge. We've been able to actually see our community leverage its influence and our hospitality here to deepen the ties between India and North Carolina from an economic perspective. And we've also, as Steve has talked about, from even a political perspective, we're seeing a record number of Indian Americans appointed at our state board and commission. So now the question is, can we rally our community, can we rally our companies now to establish a direct flight from India to North Carolina to support our efforts? And you know, I believe there are a number of reasons that we can do this. I mean, first, we recognize that there are the residential, the personal interests of our citizens to go there, given the population that Steve talked about. Michael, I don't know if you have this information or not, but someone had shared with me that the second highest criminal destination here from Raleigh-Durham was either Bangalore or Mumbai, after Paris, but I could be wrong, but correct me if I'm wrong on that. But not only do we have that on the personal side, but I think, as I pointed out, the industry sectors that we have in North Carolina match up neatly with what we have in North Carolina to India, with information technology, pharmaceuticals, and clean energy. And in all of these areas, we stand in a position to deepen our ties between our state and India. And so, you know, these direct flights, I'm convinced, will not only generate more tourist dollars going back and forth coming into the state, but also establish more economic activity and build on a number of Indian companies that have expanded here in North Carolina. And so, Steve, Councilmember Rao, I want to thank you again for your leadership. Thank Ashok Abikumar, Ryan Combs, Michael, and Vimal Kalapa for being part of this effort. I know today is just the beginning of the conversation, but I look forward to doing anything that we can from the state's perspective to try to make this happen. I'm really think we can do this. Thank you.
And I think also that the growing tech community, we have so many tech companies here, and a lot of people working for small tech. I know IT Service here, Sai Sudini runs that organization. Thai Carolinas, you know, there are a lot of tech here, so we want to thank them for being here. Okay, before I begin, we're going to have Vimal Kalapa and Suresh. All right, we're gonna do that later. So the next great addition we're going to have is we're going to have Ashok Abikumar, who is a real leader in our community. He is on the North Carolina Indian Advisory, and he's also the CEO at a biotech company, Ascon Health. And he's going to be introducing our next speaker. But I just want to tell Ryan Combs that I'm so grateful for you coming here. And just to take your time out of your busy schedule to come here, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. So I'm now going to have Ashok, please.
Thank Thanks, Steve. Good evening, ladies, gentlemen. Michael Langer, Steve, Ryan, Vimal Kalapa, Senator Chowdhury, Dr. and Mrs. Sharma. The reason I'm up here is I've been tasked to introduce my close friend, Ryan Combs. Ryan Combs is a native North Carolinian. He is the head of the RTRP, which stands for Research Triangle Regional Partnership. It's a consortium of 10 counties. He runs collaboratively the heads of these 10 counties to attract business from I would say overseas primarily, focuses on Europe, and he was also instrumental in helping myself and a group of us help bring one of the larger automotive conglomerates to Lee County. It's a multi-billion-dollar company. Ryan is, I should say, one of those few who has the ability to draw his connections with the business world, with the bureaucrats, and in the political world. The evidence of which I saw very recently, a few weeks ago, when I was in Washington, D.C. with him to an event that he was kind enough to invite me to. He had a whole bunch of senators there, U.S. senators, he had congressmen, he had more than 20 ambassadors, I believe, and trade representatives from multiple countries and businessmen. He also holds the annual State of the Region event here in Raleigh, and that is a testament to his connections and the respect that he draws in this state of North Carolina. He's a native North Carolinian, like I said, born and raised in Raleigh, a graduate of NC State, and a true champion for North Carolina's success story. Ryan Combs.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm so pleased to be here this evening. Steve called me a couple weeks ago to tell me about this event, and he told me what it was about Mike Landeth getting up, and I shot out. I said, well, I want to come and introduce Mike, because I think it's really important. You've heard my accolades. I appreciate everything you said, Ashok, but it takes a community to do great things, and I think that's what we're all here about tonight. So you've already heard Steve talk about Barat Forge. You know, that was an opportunity that came through. I work very closely with Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina, our local municipalities, our county economic development teams. And when we had this opportunity, it was between us and South Carolina. And so what did we do to separate ourselves? When the CEO of the company came, I called Ashok, and Ashok sent one text message out to a bunch of people in the Indian community. They all came together, and when the CEO walked in Ashok's house and saw this outpour of support from the Indian community, he knew this is where he wanted to be as opposed to South Carolina. So that's important. So what we're here to talk about tonight is a direct flight to India. And that's a very heavy lift. We've done this a couple of times in the region. We did it with the direct flight to London. We've done it with Paris. It's a heavy task, but it's when the business community and the community at large comes together to do something great. We also talk about Senator Chowdhury and emphasis. I mean, that's another great example of the community coming together, people knowing each other, and getting stuff done. So, you know, the Indian community is such an important part of what's happening here. I think your stats said 57,000 people, 57,000 Indian Americans are here. I mean, you're leaders in so many different industries, from healthcare to life sciences to tech to education, and you should be very proud of your contributions to the growth of this region. I mean, we're booming. We're expecting to grow by another 1 million people in the next 20 years, and so there are great things to come ahead. But I really just wanted to come this evening because I think we need to be realistic about our goals. Mike Landeth is one man, and if you could see what he deals with on a daily basis, I can't imagine being in a role where every day you get up trying to figure out where you're going to find money to do things. And if everybody's been to our airport, you've seen, I believe before the pandemic, we had something like 54 or 55 consecutive months of growth. We need a new runway. We need more gates. We need more TSA lines. This is what Mike has to do on a daily basis. But even though we have all those challenges, in the last 2 years, we've been voted one of the top 5 airports in the country for satisfaction of customers. in the last 4 years, let's see, the top 10 the last 4 years in a row. Everybody in this room knows we have a fabulous airport. We want to continue to grow that airport, and we want to do great things. Mike is one man. He's got a great team that works with him, but it takes a community to come together. It takes the business community. And so that's what we're here for. So I really wanted to be here tonight to tell you, you couldn't have a better person running the RDU airport. We're very blessed to have him. Everybody knows how smooth it is to come and lead from RDU. And so I'm privileged to be a part of this. I'm privileged to work with you on a daily basis. And I turn it over to Mike.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and come down here, but I want to say thank you to Ryan. Ryan, thank you very much. That was a very nice introduction. And I want to say thank you for this great turnout tonight. This is a fantastic turnout. I guess I know what's going on. There's probably not a cricket game tonight, right? You guys decided to come here, so I guess I'm the default for no cricket. So I have a couple of my team members here. So sitting in the front row is Mr. David Friedman. He's our Senior Vice President and Chief Revenue Officer. He's also got the responsibility for recruiting air service, and he has just come back from a 14-day trip across the world, helping us try to recruit additional service into our community. Next to him is Ms. Crystal Feldman. She's got a very long title, Vice President of Community, Governance, and Community Affairs. So she's the one at the very end of this presentation will say, well, let me tell you what Mr. Langeth was really supposed to say. So she'll clear all this mess up at the very end in terms of what we've actually got. So I'm going to operate off the floor because I'm going to operate off some of these slides. So between the two, I'm probably going to slide over here so you kind of turn your attention over here. I'll kind of walk you through what we've got. One last person up there on the stage is Mr. Howard Mann. Howard works for Campbell Hill Aviation Group. They're a consulting group that we use that helps us put together a strategy for recruiting not only domestic but international air service. And I will tell you, Howard is one of the best in the industry, and we're very lucky to have him on our team. You're going to get, in a couple minutes, be able to hear from him as well about what it looks like from the market standpoint. So, a little bit about what we'll try to do here. First, I'm going to share with you a little bit about what I call the state of RDU. Most of you are probably aware that we went through a pandemic, and we lost quite a few customers. And so what does the rebound kind of look like? What does it look like domestically? What does it look like from the international standpoint? We will then talk about Vision 2040. Vision 2040 is our long-term airport infrastructure plan. And why is that important? Because you have to have the infrastructure in place to support the long-term growth. If I don't have gates for wide-body aircraft, you can fly that entire distance and never be able to get off the airplane. So we need to make sure we have the infrastructure there to support this community's continued growth. We're also going to share with you what our objectives are. So what are we trying to achieve as an authority in terms of recruiting air service, not only domestically, but also internationally? What are the objectives we've got laid out? And then, of course, we're going to do a little Air Service Recruitment 101, where Howard will come down and walk you through the process that the airlines go through to evaluate the markets. What are the things that are important to them? How do they determine where they're going to fly? What kind of fleet are they going to acquire? He's going to walk you through some of that stuff, and I think it'll be very informative, so you kind of get inside the head of a route planner of how they're making decisions of where they're going to fly to. And then, of course, you're very interested in flying to India, correct? Did I get that right? Yes. Excellent. So we're going to share with you a little bit about the data. So who's actually providing the connectivity right now in the United States, and what does it take to actually get that service? How many people do you actually need at the end of the day? To put in perspective, these types of aircraft we're talking about, for these long-haul flights, are about 275 people. The airlines want to put 275 people on board that airplane every single day. That will be a challenge as we kind of move forward, but it's also an opportunity. And then at the very end, I'll come back up and share with you what can the community do to try to help. Because again, this is going to be a partnership. Does anybody have any idea how many tickets I will buy to India on an annual basis? Say again? No, I won't buy 57,000. My wife will have me after that one. If I'm lucky, maybe one. My point is, I'm not really the customer at the end of the day. I'm going to be your facilitator for your airport, this your liaison with that company, wherever that company might be, to try to sell them, say these are your customers and this is where they want to go. We provide that link in terms of that communication, but we don't really buy the tickets. And at the end of the day, that airline is interested in you. They're interested in you because you're truly the customer at the end of the day. And then last but not least, we will get into, I think Steve, you got either a panel or we can get into Q&A. But if I could ask you just to hold your questions to the end, Be more than happy to stay as long as you want to try to answer as many questions as we can. I will tell you, I handle all true false, so I do all the true false. And Howard does all the essay type questions. Longer questions, he does those things. So we'll try to keep you entertained as much as we can. So let's kind of walk through here the state of RDU, what this kind of looks like at the end of the day. So this is what we call screening data. So this is data we get from the Transportation Security Administration of how many people go through the checkpoint. Anybody know how to read a graph like this? Yeah, this is bad. This is really bad. So on April of 2020, what we saw is we lost 96% of our customers. Anybody can run a business where you lose 96% of your customers? We had to. We had to figure out how we did that very, very quickly. Oh, let me go back. One of the things that we wound up seeing is you see all these little points on the map. Anybody know what that represents? Because it's important for the discussion when we talk about international service. It's leisure customers. What we saw spiking, the leisure customers were the first ones back. It wasn't the business customers. And when you start talking about international service, those carriers are interested in the business customer. That seems to be the priority, and then kind of the leisure customer kind of comes next. So when you see that, that is different than what we've seen in the past in terms of these types of recoveries from recessions and Gulf Wars and those types of things. This is a little bit of a game changer here. As you can see, we're probably somewhere between 80 and 90% recovery from where we were in the 2019. And our 2019 we'll refer to a lot throughout this presentation is what we call our high water mark. We had 14.2 million customers that came through that facility during that period of time. So to validate this, this is a chart that basically shows about your business customers. And what you see here is it's still lagging. So we're still down by about 25%. If you listen to somebody like Bill Gates would tell you that 50% of that business customer would never come back. I'm not sure that it's going to be that high, but all the great technology things that people have developed, like those computers and Zoom and all the video conferencing, that's going to stick a little bit. And so we're going to see a little bit of that kind of declining. Here's the great thing about our particular community. The great thing is if my pie was only this big when I went into the pandemic for business customers, when we came out of the pandemic, my pie grew significantly. Think of all the major announcements that occurred right here in our local community because of things that like Ryan Combs is doing and our senator is doing to recruit these great companies like the Apples and the Googles of the world. It grew significantly. So even though I'm going to get less of that percentage, the pie is much larger, which is a good thing when you're talking to airlines about recruitment into the market itself. A lot of lines here. One thing to note, this will be on the final exam, so you should pay attention to this. It's on the final. Folks, this is the best jokes I've got for the night. Okay? I'm doing my best. So this is an example. You see Canada, Mexico, these are our tree lines. So you see the big drop off, and this shows you kind of recovery. So look who really had a significant recovery. It was Mexico. Why? It was a leisure destination. People could be outside, and so that's where you started to see people kind of gravitate towards. And that's kind of what we saw for recovery. It was more of leisure destinations, and the airlines took a lot of their assets domestically and repositioned them from business markets to leisure markets is what we saw. We didn't fare as well because we're probably a 50-50 blend, where other places, let's say if you're in Wyoming, where it's more of a leisure destination, there's a lot more people who go out there for recreation. They probably had a higher return than what we wound up seeing. But you can even see in the Pacific area, look at that, still have not fully recovered at this point in time. You know, prior to the pandemic, one of the things we were pursuing is nonstop service to China. People say, well, why aren't you pursuing nonstop service to China today? Well, here's one of the reasons why. Because the market really hasn't returned. Probably battleships between an island probably don't help. Hopefully we can get that resolved, but it's very challenging. But just try to give you an idea of what that market correction started to look like after the pandemic. So as we walked in from 2019 and 2020 for the pandemic, we had 57 different nonstop and 5 international. We bottomed out at 25 and 0. So we lost from 57 down to 25. We had 25 nonstop and we lost all international service. Since that point in time, we have clawed our way back from all the things that our team is doing, Howard is doing, and we've got it back to 50 and 5. And by the time we get into that kind of November time frame, we'll be probably 52, 54 by 7. So we're going to actually have more international service than what we had when we actually entered. A lot of those wind up being some leisure, and I'll share with you in just a minute what that leisure kind of looks like at the end of the day. So this is our market share. When I began here in 2011, I think we had about 8 or 9 different airlines. Today we've got 14 different airlines, and we will continue to grow that portfolio. And that's typically one of the objectives we have, is grow the portfolio. And why would we want to do that? Because if you have one carrier like you have in Charlotte, they control 95% of the market, they control price. By us providing competition, what we do is we able to try to keep competition on that price so you can get very affordable fares. So that's part of our strategy is we want to have a very diverse portfolio of carriers flying in and out of the market to keep fares down in our local market. So a little bit about that connectivity of what we actually got returned. So the Canadian service, it returned. It was a little bit on the slow side of return. Canada was very restrictive in terms of the re-entry back into that country. They still have some restrictions that you get into Canada and you could get randomly tested, and if you pick up COVID, you're going to be quarantined there for 14 days before they let you get out of there. So that's had a little bit of limitations in terms of its recovery. We've also seen American Airlines that came back. That's a great thing. A little bit, and I think Ryan hit on this just a little bit, the recruitment for American Airlines, which is 20 plus years ago, started with a company in our community that had 5 corporate airplanes. They sold those airplanes and then committed to buying seats on that airplane. That is how that service came about. A commitment from the local community to buy tickets on that airplane made that service that's been flying for 20 years plus. Typically what we found over the years is that front of cabin, we call first class, was sold out on just about every single flight. That is a great thing for the carriers, and a lot of cargo underneath it as well. The para service from Delta Airlines, it's returned as well. Once again, this is where the community came together. In order to recruit that service, it took a combination of the airport and the business community coming up with an incentive program to recruit it in. So the airport came to the tune of about a $1.2 million incentive package, and private companies, about 8 to 10 different private companies, came to the tune of $1 million that they put on the table as an incentive to drive that market and put that service into play. For Delta Airlines, their risk of not having a customer, so the first day when they put it there, their investment over a 12-month period was going to be somewhere between $80 and $90 million, and not knowing if one customer was going to get on board that airplane. When you start talking about India, which is a much further haul from that, you're probably north of $150 million that they're going to put at risk to come into a market. So they're looking for a little bit of what we call skin in the game. If you have skin in the game, you're willing to commit to that, you're going to help that aircraft and that airline be successful in that market. And we have clearly demonstrated in this community where we've had 2 situations where we've done very, very well, and they have returned after a pandemic. That says a lot about your community, and that's why we're optimistic about continued growth in terms of international service as we come forward. Another one in here is Iceland Air. Iceland Air is very unique from that standpoint. That country actually uses those airplanes to bring people into their country. It's cold up there. So they have to do everything they can to try to encourage them to bring people in. And that's what they do. So from an incentive standpoint, nothing needed from the business community, but it's more of a leisure play. We provided some incentives, marketing fees, fee waivers and marketing support in order to get that service in. That service was scheduled to end in October. It's going to continue all the way through January. That market has been flying a little bit north of about 90% full, which is outstanding, and it looks like they're going to start that service back up, maybe April, May timeframe, so it looks like that's going to be a win for the organization as well as we move forward. And of course, JetBlue wanting to go to Cancun. I will tell you, as we came out of the pandemic, I think I had 7 or 8 different airlines all flying to Cancun at the same time because that seemed to be the only place open as we kind of came out of COVID, but we've done very, very well from that space. And last but not least, Bahamas Air. So we just made that announcement. Again, another country that uses their national airline to use to bring people in from a travel and tourism standpoint. So again, marketing support, fee waivers, those types of things. Didn't require an investment from businesses because that's not really, it's more of a leisure play at the end of the day. So depending upon where we're going, where we're trying to recruit for, we use different strategies based upon what we're trying to kind of achieve. And of course, that means that we pick up 7 nonstops. Again, we enter the pandemic with 5 nonstops. So a little bit about, how is recovery, what does recovery kind of look like? So this is employment data. So employment data means the customers come through the front door. Typically, when we do something with the press, we talk about total customers. So the customers in the front door plus the customers coming off the airplane equals total customers. Once again, this formula is going to be on the final exam. Keep good notes, okay? So if you look at this, we have, you're not going to look at it. So almost 7 million in payments, total about 14 million in 2019, 2020. We went down to about 1.73 or a total of 3 million. And then last year came out about 10 million total customers. And by this year, we think we'll be at about 12.5 total is where we'll wind up landing for the year. So looks like we're on a road to recovery, and you can kind of see this general trend line. We still feel comfortable about that. I know people are starting to talk a little bit about kind of the R word, recession, but you just have to look at the economics in our local community, what Ryan has been doing in terms of recruiting these businesses and our economic development partners, and what our legislators have done to position this community and this region and this state. They've done a great job of recruiting great companies in here so we can all have good paying jobs and a good quality of life. And it's starting to show up because we're very, very comfortable about what we see for the future is long-term growth for the region. So let's talk about Vision 2040. So Vision 2040 is our long-term airport master plan. That really is a plan that lays out the critical infrastructure that we would need over the next 20 years. In 2019, the plan was approved in 2016, but by 2019, we had already accelerated all the way to 2031 for our activity that was going through the airport. We anticipated by 2022, prior to the pandemic, we would have exceeded our 2040 plan, which meant that a $3.6 billion program that we thought we would build over a 20-year period needed to be built right away. That's what our growth looked like. We're starting to return to that as part of this process. And we have 4 major areas that we will look at. First is going to be the airfield. So the only thing difference between a mall manager and me, you know what the difference between a mall manager and me? Runways. That's the only difference. We're pretty much otherwise pretty much the same. So for us, it's going to be a lot about infrastructure in terms of the airfields, runways, taxiways to make sure they can accommodate these long-range aircraft. Second piece is going to wind up being terminals. We're going to continue to grow. And as we grow, we need additional gates to meet that capacity long term. Ground transportation. Anybody been to the airport late at night, last flight coming in, see all the traffic congestion we've got there? When we designed that facility, we never anticipated Uber and Lyft as a concept when they designed it back in the early 2000 time frame. So we're trying to figure out how we reposition to develop a ground transportation center. So that's a large infrastructure investment we have to make. Last but not least, winds up being kind of general aviation, which is those corporate aircraft. As we enter the pandemic, we hit the brakes on all of that. That came to a dead stop. When you lose 96% of your customers and there's no cash coming in the front door, and you really don't know what the recovery is going to look like, nobody's got a game plan, you had to shut down. But we are really starting to throttle back up pretty quickly here. That program, as we enter the pandemic, about $3.6 billion. Today, because of inflation, that's north of $4 billion. And as of today, we think we are probably, between now and 2030, going to need to invest about $2.2 billion. So what are some of those things we're going to invest in? So first, let's start with the airfield. This is our signature project. So the current runway that you're taking off, that 10,000 foot, so if you're Terminal 2, you look out over the airfield, that is our longest runway, 10,000 foot. It's really end of life. Most people don't realize this, but we have had to do surgically slab replacements that when London and Paris take off, we close the runway down, we saw cut out a 25 by 25 slab. They fly over, they drop customers off, and they fly back to the airport as we're pouring concrete. We've done that about 250 times. He said, why would you run an airport like that? Because we have not had a lot of help from the Federal Aviation Administration to accelerate the replacement of this runway. We've been working for 7 years to get an environmental document completed. 7 years, it should have taken us about 18 months. We're working through that. We should get what we'll call a record of decision by 2023 and have shovels in the ground in 2023. Construction cycle, about 5 years. And if you kind of look at this, we will build a 10,639 foot runway. That's what we're going to build as a replacement. And that will also allow us to expand out our terminal. So that is going to be a large investment, and that investment is going to be north of about $400 million for us to put that into play. Top of that, we have to build, these are large aprons. So what happens right now at nighttime, every single gate is occupied by an aircraft, and I still have additional aircraft that need a place to sit. So we're building large aprons like this to accommodate, because in 2019, in the morning, every gate was occupied. U.S. customers got on those airplanes. As soon as you pushed off the gate, they tugged another airplane in play. So we were turning that facility before 8 o'clock in the morning at least twice and pushing. Over 30% of our customers go through that facility before 8 a.m. in the morning. We push a lot of people through that facility very, very early as we move forward. So we're talking about the terminals itself. This is pretty exciting. So this is kind of a concept we've got. So you want international service, correct? One of the things we've got to wind up doing is in this section of the building itself is what we call our federal inspection station. So John Brantley Boulevard kind of works around. This is the front of the terminal. As you kind of get off the current international, it works down here, and then here's our international facility. If we have multiple aircraft coming from Europe and from that region, and they're all going to get on the ground on a similar time, they typically do, I need to have the ability to process lots of customers through the facility. We need to start building for the future. The other piece, we've already started what we call a landside program. So everything on the land side, all the ticket counters, checkpoints, all those types of things, we have to expand that first before I can get into almost a 20-gate expansion that we have here at RDU. Because if you don't increase the throughput on the front end, it's not going to do you any good just to have those additional gates. So we're starting that process. The investment's probably north of $200 million we'll wind up making to get that done. And of course, we're going to be looking at, right now, I think we've got two locations that we can offload 2 wide-body aircraft. And we're trying to figure out, should we go 3, 4, or 5? I think Howard has always told me, go 5, Mike. Do 5. You need 5. Because we could have 3 or 4 on the ground at the exact same time coming from that particular direction that we needed. Okay, it won't advance. That could be the end of the presentation, folks. It really could. All right. We'll keep going here. So ground transportation, a couple of things we're going to wind up doing. You're probably familiar. This is the current parking structure we have right here. John Brantley Boulevard, we're going to wind up kicking that out. This large structure right here is a consolidated rental car facility. So the current facilities we've got, they really don't represent our community very well. This is probably about a $500 million investment to improve that. Allows the customers to come right out of this facility and into this location so they can get that rental car quickly and get on to where they want to go. We've also got some parking structures in here that we're going to have to tear down and rebuild to provide additional throughput. And we will develop inside this facility on that bottom floor what we call a ground transportation center. So if you're going to take an Uber and Lyft in the future, that's where you're going to wind up going to get it. That should reduce the congestion on the curb front. When we reduce the congestion on the curb front, it means people are trying to pick up families. That way you don't have to be in a long line to pick the families up. All commercial transportation goes into a central location, hopefully getting people through that facility a lot quicker from a ground transportation standpoint. So let's talk about our air service recruitment objectives. All right, first one, continued expansion of RDU route network. So if you think about a large hub, the reason why people like large hubs is because you can connect to 100 to 125 different nonstop destinations. People like not having to make a connection through a hub. Our objective is the same. We just want to do it in a fashion that we can recruit lots of carriers to provide competition. So one of the objectives is to continue to expand the route network. The other one is to attract airlines to promote competition. Again, we can provide competition. What is it going to do from an airfare standpoint? It's going to drive your airfares down. So we'll continue to try to make sure we provide this balanced portfolio, that we don't have a dominant carrier that's going to provide them the ability to charge you premium pricing for service. Increased options for both business and leisure. We've seen some of the new recruitments. Bahama Airs is a good example for leisure. So we will continue to pursue the business and leisure component. And of course, growing passenger volumes. If we see opportunities where there's an underserved market and we can grow that passenger base where we can get nonstop service, again, if I can go from 42 of my top destinations to serve nonstop, and I can continue to have points in the map, that I can get close to what it looks like a hub without having the penalty of only one airline, that's a benefit for you that you can fly nonstop. Of course, what they call nurture relationships. So this is a great opportunity where talking with companies like Delta Airlines, having a good relationship with them, they've now identified RDU in Austin as the 2 locations is what they call a focus city. Mike, what's a focus city? Focus city is where that airline is going to make a large investment by putting more aircraft in there than a typical airport. Large hubs are like Atlanta. The next level down is a focus city. That means we are nurturing a relationship with them to say, make an investment in our community. Our community is going to continue to grow and provide that additional connectivity as we move forward. Also contribute to the economic expansion. I know Ryan can talk about that quite a bit. When he's out there marketing, he's talking about the connectivity we provide all over the world. Because a lot of times businesses just don't sell their products and services right here in Morrisville. They'll sell here just in North Carolina. They don't sell it here just in the United States. They sell their products and services worldwide, and we need to make sure we can provide that connectivity to get you to the places that you need to travel to. And of course, hopefully, we're adding value to your life in terms of your ability to get to those locations you want to go to, either from a leisure standpoint or a business standpoint. All right, now we're going to transition to Howard. And Howard, I'll switch off with you. Howard's going to start walking through kind of what I call Air Service 101, of what the airlines are looking for from a recruiting standpoint. So Howard, bottom line.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for everyone for having us this evening. It's obviously a real pleasure to be here. You know, ultimately, Mike and David and Crystal and the leadership team at RDU were constantly talking to airlines, both in terms of the health of our current route network and ensuring that we're talking about potential new routes. Some people like to say, as Mike mentioned with the Paris effort, air service development is a marathon, it is not a sprint. But certainly the RDU region has, and North Carolina has some great demographics that get us to the table to talk about why it's important to invest in the community. So just to kind of set everyone's expectations, this is a typical way that an airline decides how to deploy their assets, whether that's Emirates, Air India, British Airways, Delta Airlines. They are making fleet plan decisions almost 5 years in advance. And when they purchase that new 787 or A350, they need to come up with potential routes that they're going to be looking at. And then they're going to be then doing schedule development almost 18 months in advance, and then also optimizing and then delivering a schedule for people to purchase new flights. And at that same time, they are balancing every single way they can use that airplane. So if they're looking at RDU with a 787, they are also looking at, should I send that plane to Brisbane, Australia? Should I send that plane to Sao Paulo? It truly is a very global industry as these airlines are deploying their assets. So these are all of the things, ultimately what our firm does to support RDU and what we do as a team is we look at a ton of data. We actually have access to see how many people today are traveling between RDU and the entire global network. So we know on average how many people go to London Heathrow, how many people on average go to London Heathrow and then go beyond into the Indian market. So we actually also get airfare information. These are all things that we were doing trend analysis up to before the COVID pandemic, and then understanding what are the trends, how have they changed, how have the airfares changed. Maybe it's harder to get to a location, maybe it's easier to get to a location. As Mike said, now we can look at the data and say, is everyone going to go to Cancun in the future and continue to go to Cancun, or once borders open and international traffic flow is fully open, that thing will change. We know the fleet plans, we know the aircraft availability, there's schedule constraints, there's times at US Customs, there's different government policies that are all kind of the way that we evaluate and analyze how we're going to do our air service development, both in the short term, medium term, and long term. Definitely a huge thing is also cargo. Cargo really surged through the pandemic, so understanding the shippers in the region as well is very important. So we're constantly talking to airlines about the health of our current services, but then we're also talking about our international services. Now, we have American Airlines operating the London Heathrow flight daily, and we have the Delta Airlines flight to Paris. But as everyone may know, those airlines are what we call immunized partners with their European carrier. So as we have American Airlines, we essentially have British Airways in the market. It's just that it is an American Airlines plane operating that service. So we have connections throughout the British Airways network. And again, with the Paris service, it's not just Delta Airlines, it is Air France. So some of those things that Mike mentioned, being a focus city for Delta Airlines, just down the road from the world's largest airline hub, is something that's a testament to the community, that Delta sees that value in also having a niche operation and international service out of the triangle. So we're constantly engaging more international airlines to say, have you started looking at our market? This is the data that we see. This is the fare data. This is the connecting traffic that we're seeing on all of our current services. And you should think about looking at RDU when you're setting your strategy for the next 2 years, 5 years, 7 years as you deploy your fleet plan. So when we talk about India, it is a market that generates significant enough traffic that it's then going to become a conversation with all of the European carriers we're talking to. It's going to be a conversation about the American carriers to say, well, tell us how this can benefit some of our partners. So we have had conversations, obviously as I just mentioned, on the Delta Air France conversation. How is the Paris flight becoming a good conduit and remaining a good conduit when it returned in August for that passenger to India? Because we know it is one of the significant large connecting markets. But then we're also talking about enhancing the connectivity between RDU and India. So that also means talking to other airlines that can get us to hubs that connect between the Indian market and RDU. So you're going to see things like the Middle East carriers. We have conversations with Emirates as they say, well, we're going to continue to grow. The North American market is very important. Tell us about your community. And I'll go through some other data. It's not just about the number of people who are traveling today. It's about the Indian foreign-born population here in the triangle that we're able to give, or ancestry information, or business links, as Ryan helps us out so much in terms of identifying those links. And then, of course, you have the Indian carriers. Now, there is, Indian carriers have changed. Air India, obviously, I think today or yesterday, recently finished their transition over to the Tata Group. So they have also been responding to the US-India market. So they're trying to say, well, how am I going to deploy my 787s and my 777s? Some of you may have seen that Air India is leasing an extra 6 airplanes in order to keep up with the demand that's happening in the US market right now. And then also understanding what are the new players. Vistara, they're ordering long-haul, they have long-haul aircraft. They're serving Europe, so they haven't announced any plans to go to the US yet. Obviously, some of India's most successful, profitable airlines are its domestic carriers. Indigo, which is super, super profitable and strong and growing, and now they have an agreement with American Airlines to say, how can we link up our market with our domestic market that's been recovering quite fast in the post-COVID environment. And again, what we're always doing is we're telling these airlines what our story is. Our story is that we have some really good demographics, economic growth, corporate expansion, migration. One of the things we're looking at really heavily right now is identifying the migration from New York and the Midwest and California into RDU. Because what's that doing is that's also bringing travel habits from people who are in those areas now moving to the Triangle. They're going to want the same type of destinations that they're used to and traveling back and forth into the region. And we just have an array of big news. We have big news on a very consistent basis. So these are the types of things that we do to tell our story to the airline partner. And again, that airline partner may be an airline that's already in our market and may have a global alliance and other partners that they can bring. Or it's truly a new entrant that's saying, I need to create what my strategy is going to be in the next 5 to 7 to 10 years. And again, we do a lot of information analysis on our catchment. So not only can we see what's happening in our traditional RDU area, which is Raleigh, Cary, and Durham in our MSAs, but now we can see when we have an international service, we are drawing passengers from outside our traditional area. Because obviously people are going to seek that longer haul service. Maybe Iceland is now getting, we have the only flight in Iceland to Iceland from North Carolina. So maybe we're pulling passengers from that Charlotte region who are wanting to go and visit the volcanoes or the black sand beaches. So we do a lot of analysis here, and a lot of our periphery airports have lost some connecting flights. So RDU may be gaining more share of that traffic, but it's something we do really focus on when we look at the international service levels. So air service to India, everything at the end of the day involves us talking about data and going back and forth with our airlines. So India is the 10th largest destination from the United States in terms of international travelers. So, not surprising, Mexico and Canada are the first and second. The UK market is very strong, and then India comes in at number 10. So India is a very large market. Obviously, as Mike mentioned, it is an ultra long haul market. You're going to need an airplane that can fly 13 or 14 hours to get there if you're going to fly nonstop. So one of the things that you're going to see is, again, how can we enhance that in the short term in the building blocks to build future enhanced direct service between the two. So when you look at all transatlantic markets, in terms of nonstop flights, India is the 15th largest. So what does that mean? That means that a lot of people are carrying this traffic over one-stop services, right? Because of that distance, because of the ability to tap into hubs and distribute traffic throughout, India becomes the 15th largest transatlantic market for nonstop. So many of you have been hearing, probably through the pandemic, United is tripling their flights to India. Air India is already back in all of their destinations and coming back to more. Emirates has deployed everything. Qatar is now bigger. Turkish is now bigger. These are all the things that are trying to take advantage of, again, the 10th largest international market from the United States. So now it gets to the data part. So we can see how many people every day come from every market to all of India. So on average, from JFK, there are 1,047 people who go to India and 1,000 people who come from all of India to JFK Airport in New York. And here you can kind of see that we've color-coded this. The yellow markets, San Francisco, Chicago O'Hare, Newark, there will be a test on airport codes. These are all markets that have nonstop service or planned nonstop service to India. Seattle, for those of you who don't know, American is planning and has filed a schedule for Bangalore to take advantage of the tech. Now that was announced before the pandemic. We'll see if that still continues. And then the blue is obviously service to the Middle East. Anyone who has traveled between the US and India is familiar with the hubs in Doha, in Dubai, and Abu Dhabi, because those are large conduits to the Indian market. And obviously there's a benefit. If you're going to anywhere outside of Delhi and Mumbai, those hubs became very seamless connections into the secondary markets and still Delhi, Mumbai. So then you come all the way down to Raleigh-Durham. So this is something that those partner airlines will say, what is the market like today? How is it growing? How can we best serve it? Maybe the best way to serve it is to enhance our intermediate services through other hubs with the idea that longer term, we can make that case for nonstop. So right now there are 75 people a day that fly from Raleigh-Durham to India and another 75 that fly back on average. And it's actually not very seasonal. It's very continuous throughout the entire year, right? Sometimes you can see with a Cancun or another market that there's a seasonal bump. So this is the type of information that Air India will look at, that Air Canada will say, I'm going to start that flight up Raleigh, Toronto, and Montreal because I'm starting my own Delhi-Montreal service, and I'm going to take advantage of just a little bit of that connecting market with my new Montreal-Delhi flight. So this is all something that we look at. We look at how it's growing. We look at it on an annual basis. We look at how it's recovered in the market. And again, one of the things about India traffic is that it's very distributed throughout the subcontinent. So it's not just people who are going to Mumbai and Delhi. Obviously, Bangalore is very strong, Chennai is very strong. So not only do you want a nonstop service, is it going to have to go to one place, but it's going to have to distribute. Again, some of the benefit, if another airline is saying, well, I'm already serving from Europe into 7 Indian cities, or I have a partner of an Indian air carrier that can get me then through the market. We can see exactly where people are going. So this breaks down the 75 people per day and where they're going in India as of 2019. And again, then the question becomes is who has airplanes? Remember, that very first slide is how are they ordering airplanes and how are they prepared to respond to those 75 people and how that's growing. So Air India has 46 long-haul aircraft, right? We talked about they're trying to lease a couple, about 6 more in short order. Emirates has 462 long-haul aircraft, okay? We talked about that we're already a part of the British Airways and the Air France network. You can see the 167, 140. One of the things we've seen during the pandemic is airlines have retired older airplanes. So those beloved 747s in British Airways are going out the door. So this helps us inform our decisions in terms of talking about that. I will say, if you live on the west coast of the United States, you're very used to flying on Singapore, you're very used to flying on Cathay Pacific, because then you can directionally go that way. But the market is growing. So it was growing 7% annually before the pandemic, and we can already see year-ending June data. It is coming back, but it's not back up to that level of what it was during the pandemic. And that's why we talk about informing us and helping the airport at the ask at the end of this. Tell us how in your business or in your leisure community or in your crossover business and leisure community are you making those same number of trips back to that market? Because it's very important for us to help share that information. And again, we talk about Europe. Europe is a great waypoint, and that's when we think about in the short term, how can we increase our connectivity? It's not only making London and Paris stronger, it's also expanding our connect points in the market. So again, 61% of the market is back. Of those 75 today, 75 before the pandemic, right now we have about 50 a day traveling. And we're gonna see that every quarter hopefully increase so that we can keep our airline partners up to date. This is fascinating, right? The US-India market is big, okay? This breaks down how many people fly nonstop between the US and India. So we love data, we love looking at this, and this helps inform our decisions when we're talking. 422,000 people fly nonstop from the US to India, okay? So that's Newark to Mumbai, San Francisco to Bangalore, big market. Another 314,000 fly a US nonstop to India and go into the Indian subcontinent, into secondary destinations. And now we're going to see probably numbers that include all of previous tickets that you guys have booked. 1 million passengers fly from a smaller city in the US to a larger gateway and then fly on to India. And then look at the 4 million US-India passengers fly between a non-US hub and connect into India between the US. So here we have those types of services. Dubai, the largest connect point between the US and India, Doha, Frankfurt, all of these services. So it also helps us inform our discussion about, can we enhance our connectivity to some of these markets? We already have 2 of these markets in the triangle. So this is something important to help us as we engage those airlines for a short-term benefit. And then again, here from Raleigh, 34% of the people who travel between RDU and India fly one-stop service. So there's still a benefit for us to tell potential airlines. There's still a lot of people flying 2 stops, and we want them to fly 1 stop. So this just shows you this. 9% of that critical Paris and London flight connects onto India. So again, it's significant. It's obviously not as big as the local non-stop traffic to London and Paris, but it's still very strong. And then every airline will default to this list, okay? What is the current Indian-born population? Because we talked about that list already previously about who also doesn't have nonstop service to India. The largest airport in the world is down the road, and they have 87,000 Indian, their Indian-born population is 87,000. So that's where it's important to understand where our business links and how things are moving. But this is, again, data points that we look at very frequently. And again, the total Indian population of Indian ancestry. So we look at the traffic data, the fare data, and the census data to help us make our decision in terms of how we do this kind of recruitment efforts. But this could mean that an airline that serves India and may want to come into RDU may say, that's a really good connecting opportunity for us to stimulate as well. I think we're getting to the end here. And that is it. So I'll give it back to Mike. Thank you, everyone.
Sorry, this is going to be death by PowerPoint tonight, but you know, as you can see, there's lots of information, lots of data. We're trying to give you a really good perspective of what the opportunity looks like, and also some of the challenges. So what do we need from the community in terms of overall health? First of all, I want you to look at where they're currently providing connectivity. Air India and the U.S. carriers are flying to 16 different destinations. A lot of these destinations have 1,500 daily passengers each way. Everybody told you got 75 in our local market. That is a big leap. That is a big jump. And that is a lot of seats that have to be filled. You can stimulate a market, but that is a big jump to pass up an airport like Atlanta, the largest airport in the world, and come to an RDU. So again, trying to give you an idea of some of these communities that actually have the service. We want to provide you the data. Something else, and this is interesting. This is an article that was just produced September 19, 2022, Airline Weekly, and it talked about Air India. Now they changed some ownership, and they're now starting to make some investment in airplanes. You heard them talk about, I think, 5, maybe 6 new wide-body, long-range aircraft. That is a good thing, but they have so many different locations that they can actually fly to. We have to compete with all of them. It's not just here in the United States. It could be Australia, it could be China, and they're going to try to deploy those where they can get the largest volume of customers. And so for Air India, that's going to be very challenging for us to compete in that market today. It doesn't mean it's not possible for the future, but we, as this population continues to grow, we're going to need to build that story and build that demand as we kind of move forward. Interesting, this is at Air India. They talked about, in the article, there's 2 things. They grew significantly, but then again, they didn't grow significantly. What happened over the past 10 years is domestically, they spent most of their time and energy within the country of India trying to provide connectivity is what they focused in on. And if you look over the past 10 years, what they did from an international standpoint, they only about a 58% growth. So they were not focused on that, and that's why you see a lot of the Middle East carriers came into India to provide that connectivity on a worldwide basis. And that's why a lot of them are flowing over that or flowing through Europe. And that may be an opportunity for us to look at either flowing over the Middle East to get into India if we can't quite get nonstop service because of the demand at this point, or maybe even another carrier flying over Europe to provide connectivity. Because again, if I can provide you lots of different options to get there, it provides competition to keep prices down as we continue to build the case for that nonstop service in terms of looking at. At the same time, if you look at what China was doing, China had about a 200% growth is what they had. They had a very large interest in expanding their influence all over the world, and that also came with connectivity, nonstop connectivity in terms of what we put into play. So again, we have a very aggressive air service incentive program, and you can see as we start looking at from kind of left to right from the different markets, you go to places like Frankfurt, they've got 30.1 on a daily basis just going to Frankfurt. Remember that 75, if you break it down, one of the top cities only had about 16. So again, when you're flying to a certain destination, that nonstop in, they're going to be looking for how many people are going to stop there and how many people are going to kind of want it flowing on. So what can you do? First of all, we need to understand what the businesses and community needs for the future. And when the airlines start putting together, their forecasts, a lot of times they look in a rearview mirror of what they know in the past. But you can help us by telling us what you think that future demand is going to wind up looking like. That will help us develop a forecast that we can share with the airlines to say, this is what we think the market's going to look like. We're also going to be looking for travel and tourism information, so that's probably going to come from the state. But if there's things that the population is going to have from the travel and tourism, that needs to fit into the model as well. And of course, cargo demand. If any of you have got companies and you're going to build products and services that need to be hauled all over the world, we need to understand that. That is a component as well. And the last piece of this is there's going to be incentives in play. To recruit international service out of this market requires incentives. It's going to require incentives from the airport, and it's going to require incentives from our community. It can come from the state, it can come from businesses, it can come from citizens, but that is a pay-to-play game, is how this works within the industry to recruit air service like that. That is just the harsh reality. I'll give you a good example, St. Louis Airport just got nonstop service to Frankfurt. Their investment, state came in to the tune of about $2.5 million. Airport and some other private businesses, another $2.5. It's about a $5 million investment is what they put into play. Just to show you what that looked like. Remember what we paid for Paris? About a 2.2. So that continues to move up because there's limited aircraft, limited pilots, and so it's getting very competitive, not only domestically, but on a worldwide basis. So this will be my last slide. This is my wrap up. So what are we going to do? So we put an incentive program in place to try to be very attractive to the carriers. We'll do marketing support. So internationally, we might invest over $500,000 in marketing support to help promote that new carrier coming into our particular market. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to waive fees. So we will waive landing fees, terminal rent, anything that the airline is going to pay for that one particular aircraft, we'll wind up waiving. I'll give you an example. Iceland Air, on a given month, it's probably about a $25,000 savings that they have on a monthly basis flying to the airport from a fee waiver standpoint. So we're going to try to do everything we can. We have limitations. We can't directly subsidize any carrier coming on the market. The only people that can do that is private companies, private citizens can actually do that. And this is where the second component is what we call minimum annual revenue guarantee. If we're really interested in recruiting international service, this is what the community's got to do. We did it for Paris, we did it for London, and whatever additional service we're interested in, we're going to have to do it again to make that possible. You can do it in the form of cash, or there's another way to do it. You can also do it through a pledge support. And what that means is you guarantee buying a certain number of tickets. They want to know those tickets are sold so that airplane can be profitable at the end of the day. But those are the components that are needed. So what we need is we need information about where your business is going, where the community is going in terms of population and what the future demand is, and how the community can work with the airport trying to come up with an incentive package that we will have to compete with just about every single airport in the world to get that aircraft landing right here in RDU. And we've been successful before, we can be successful again. But I think an interim step is probably providing some connectivity through another worldwide hub to get you into India and again to provide you competition until we have the masses needed to really sell something like an Air India on a non-stop service into that market. So that I am going to give the microphone back and we'll let you run it through.
Thank you. Thank you. We've got a little over time, so just a couple of things. We're going to have a panel. I'm going to ask you a few questions, but to move us along, we might just have the panel answer the questions and share insights. So we're now going to be joined by Satish Garamella, my colleague, who serves on the council. He is, I'm not going to read his resume, but he's doing a lot of really great stuff. He serves on the League of Municipalities Board. Recently, there was a really nice article in Southern City Magazine about his journey from Mumbai to Morrisville and the kinds of things he does for our community. So I'm going to have him come up, please, Satish, Councilmember Garamella. And Vimal Kalapa will be coming here. Vimal is on the EDPNC board for North Carolina. And he's going to say just a quick word before we begin the panel. And I also wanted to thank North Carolina Association of Indian Americans for being a sponsor as well and helping for advocacy and political education. So I just want to thank them for helping us promote this event. And Saikir and Kalavenu, wherever you are, he does a lot of work behind the scenes. So let's give him and his team a round of applause as well. Thank you so much. So before, Dylan also going to be on the panel, but this is a man who needs no introduction. But he wants to just give a quick perspective as a board member of EDPNC, who's also a successful business owner in North Carolina, doing a lot of really great stuff for our community. So please, before you're also on the panel.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I just wanted to let Michael know that everyone represents here 1,000 people from various different organizations. I'm not a great speaker, sir, but I am very passionate about travel to India. I saw so many charts. God help me. I cannot remember even to walk straight now. I have to remember these charts. But somebody did a lot of work in your organization. Sir, presentations were excellent. I wish I knew this kind of presentation when I was young. I would have been somebody. But fortunately, I never could do that. But the key question here is, you said 275 passengers. One of the things that I have to tell you is, we as travelers, we go to other, like New York, Chicago, Florida, in Miami, to get to India. And then we go to Middle East. But you sitting here, you do not have an idea of what we have to go through in these places to get to India. Am I right or wrong? All right? So this is what we face every day. Now, just to give you an added statistics of Indians here, okay? I'm talking about as an Indian, not as an EDPNC member or a board member from day one, okay? In EDPNC. The reason is, we go through a lot of trouble, but when we come to Raleigh-Durham Airport, it is like coming back to home. The service is excellent. It is fantastic when compared to other places. Instead of treating us like cattle, they treat us as good human beings. You need to know that, sir. Your staff, excellent. So, the passion to get us to India from here, and when we come back to Raleigh, it's like coming home because the service is that good. People welcome you, welcome home. Do you know how difficult it is for us to come from there? No, it's not the long way, sir. When we come to New York, we have, like, I give you the personal experience of my wife. She came to Washington, D.C. 8:30. The last flight was cancelled. She had to spend the whole day at the airport. For the next flight. We all are scared. Will our flights be late to New York? If we go to Chicago, we go there at 8:30 in the morning and wait till 8 o'clock for the flight to catch us to Dubai or whatever. Sir, you have not experienced the treatment that we get in those places. So that is where the passion comes in. Am I right, gentlemen? And gentlemen, yes? All right? I have a lot of back pain, that's why my knee's here. Sarika, she asked me, Uncle, can I take you up to the stairs? I said, yes, yes, yes. She is now going to stand for election for the future as the, the Cali Council. She is going to stand for election to be in the Cali Council. Sarika Benzel is the last name. I don't want to pronounce it the right way. Old man sometimes makes it wrong. Now, coming back to the EDP-NC hat. I am there. We are putting a lot of push into the Indian subcontinent. We have now even opened an office in Bangalore, India. So there's a lot of businesses that we can recruit here. Our products can be sold there. RDU needs international recognition in the Indian subcontinental market, which is one of the fastest growing markets in the world right now. 1.6 billion people there, or 1.4, whatever it is. We have a tremendous market there. If we have straight flights, a lot of people can come here and enjoy the tourist attractions in North Carolina. That is what EDP-NC is very much interested in. I just wanted to let you know, and also how good your service is. All right?
You can join us in the panel if you want. We'll have to get an empty chair, but if someone... No, I can just stay there. Just have to get it. We'll get a chair right here. We have a chair right here. So we're going to go ahead and begin the panel.
Steve, I forgot to say one thing, okay?
Always begin.
God bless America. Jai Hind.
I got it. Okay, so we're going to try to move this along. We're running a little bit behind, so we're trying to get everyone out of here by 8:30. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask, maybe just start it off generally to the panelists, and then I'm going to then just open it up to the floor so we can get questions from the audience. And my question, please state, if you're going to make a comment, make it brief, but try to have a question. It means you have to be able to ask it within one breath, but it won't qualify as a question. Okay. I want to start with Councilmember Garamella, because he soaks, I work with this guy, and one of the things he does is he just soaks it in. I can see his mind thinking, but he won't really come out. But I think I really want to get his perspective, because Satish, you get a lot of calls from families who have to go see their parents during the pandemic. You and I were seeing a lot of folks that even couldn't see, say, last rites to their parents because they missed connections. So what do you think about this right now? What is you're a data guy, what do you think?
Thanks, Steve. And excellent presentation. I can see the passion and the in-depth knowledge that you guys came up with. And while you were going through that, I'm pretty much certain, I'm also a data guy. So the chances of getting a direct flight with 75 people is almost zero, I would say right now. So what are and I agree with Vimali, the problems is the connectivity between RDU to the bigger hubs. We had to wait 6-7 hours just getting out of US, or while coming back, which is the most strenuous. While going, you have the excitement, you have the dreams that you're seeing your family. While coming back, you're exhausted, flights come at 7 o'clock, and then you have to wait till 4 in the morning, in the evening, to get a flight here. So what can RDU do as a short term to basically ensure the connectivities are better and faster? Because it's not just Mumbai and this one, there's people who are going more in depth, and I'll go to Bangalore and then have to take a route. So there's a long route that they have to make. That is the one, and then with all the options you're saying, what are our options going into the Asian markets, or the Middle Eastern, so that opens up a better connection. So those are my two possible things, which I pretty much came out of looking at it, and I would like to ask what are our chances in improving connectivity and then getting a Middle Eastern carrier into it.
So I'll try the first one, I'll let him handle the Middle Eastern one. So I think that's something that we can do. If we recognize that the connectivity isn't great, we can kind of talk to the airlines and see how we make sure that we try to shorten those connections as much as we possibly can. We'll have to go back and look at Paris and London. We can go back and look at that and see how that flows through. But I think also opportunities for other hubs when we're having that conversation. Let's say you're going to a Frankfurt or going someplace in the Middle East. As part of that dialogue that needs to occur is, how does the connectivity then occur into India? I think we can look at that. We'll have to look at the domestic piece like New York, because we have lots of flights going back and forth to New York. So we'll have to look at that timing, why that timing is off like that. But again, we can bring that to the carriers and say, the flow into India, what can we do to try to reduce some of that timing? I mean, if you have to wait 7 or 8 hours, that is a long time to wait after being on an airplane for an extended period of time. But we can dig into that. And I'm going to let Howard talk a little bit about kind of the Middle East, what that looks like from opportunity.
Thank you. I would also note just one thing is the data tells us a story. So with London and Paris, especially Paris was in the last decade, we can see how many people shifted from connecting in a US point to get to Paris by then moving on to the nonstop. So there's still a large number of RDU India passengers who are stopping twice. So our shortest term goal is to get more of those passengers connecting once. So is that through additional deployment into Europe by British Airways and Air France through their hubs? Is it looking at an additional European point? Or is it also looking to have a conversation with the Emirates of the world? And so all of those things, sometimes our air service goals are to move from 2 stops to more 1 stops. Obviously in our Paris goal, we move from 1 stop to non-stop by giving that option. So Emirates is a fast-growing carrier. They have airport infrastructure that requires them to continue to invest in the US, as Turkish has a brand new airport, Turkey has a brand new airport, and Qatar as well. So when they look at their next 5 years to 10 years, they want to be in markets that are growing with population, with with those key ancestry numbers. So we're kind of continually telling that story. We can be small now, but with a fast-growing rate that continues to put us at the table to say, this is why you should increase the connectivity between this region and India.
I have one question, more from Michael, especially you said, as a community, what can we do? How many seats can we buy? So can you tell us more about it? Because there's so many Indian firms who are here, and I know people who almost go on a bi-weekly basis. So how can they leverage saying, okay, my employees, I can at least commit 400 seats. How does that work? I'm trying to...
Yeah, so what happens first, you have to find who those companies are, and we need to be having conversations directly with them so we can understand what that demand is going to be. But again, that demand's got to continue to grow to the point where we get the attention of an Air India or another carrier. But that's how you do that, is you got to connect us with the community. Who are those companies? We need to have relationships, direct relationships with them, so we understand what their demand is. And that way we can say, it's XYZ company that has this much demand, airline A. That's what they want to know. They want to talk to those companies, but we can be a gateway for that kind of leads to that conversation. That's how we do that. It's a relationship building is what we're trying to do. That's why we're here today, to develop a relationship with our community.
So let's go to, the last question for Ryan, then we're going to open it up for a few more minutes. But Ryan Combs, you're in the thick of it. I mean, you're out there recruiting these big companies to come in. You've been involved with Bark Forge. Wearing your economic development hat, working with Congress, the governor, and all the different things you're doing. What is your take on this? What do you think? What is your advice to the community?
Well, I kind of already mentioned that earlier. Is that this has to be a community-driven effort. This can't be look at Mike and say find us a route to India. So I was thinking about it earlier. I remember early on when I met Mike. Mike gave a good analogy about economic development. That in the 50s when they built the interstate system, economic development was where the off-ramp was. Today it's where the airports are. And so when you see the projects that we lose, oftentimes they go to bigger markets like Atlanta because the CEO wants that direct access to international markets without having to connect. And so while I think we're competitive, it certainly hurts us that we don't have more direct flights, but I feel like we're punching way above our weight, and I think opportunities like this are great.
Thanks. Okay, good. We're going to now open up the floor for questions, if there's any questions, and then we'll ask, maybe continue this conversation of just getting advice on steps that we need to take to try to make this happen. So, oh, you have a question?
We need a mic.
You need a mic. Okay.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, we good.
So with the numbers you provided, is there a possibility that the airlines can take baby steps, having a flight 5 weekly once and seeing the trends and then saying, yes, this market looks great. You can file weekly then and then maybe. Is there a possibility to talk to airlines about that?
So if I understand the question correctly, is it kind of what I call less than daily service? Can they try that? Again, it goes back, probably it starts with availability of aircraft. And again, in Air India, they've only got 5 aircraft and they have a ton of opportunities with large populations. Would they be willing to take the risk? We can always ask. I know David and Howard are going to be talking to Air India in their next meeting, November, December timeframe. So we can pose that to them. But again, that's the challenge we face, is there are so many opportunities out there because of aircraft availability and pilot shortages. We can ask.
I'll just also note that Air India is a full member of the Star Alliance, so as Air India is planning their capacity, they're also looking to see how far they can travel before they, pass on that passenger to one of their partner airlines, at, let's say, Frankfurt.
Thank you.
I've got another mic here, so just raise your hand and
No, exactly.
just if someone can pass it to the person.
Yeah, we'll pass it along.
Check.
Next question?
Next question.
Hang on.
Oh, you have one, and then, okay.
Hi, I'm Sirish Gadamakala. I represent organization NCAIA. We're supporting this event. So my question is simple, right? I think we don't want to put cart before the wheel. Maybe rather, I think we should walk before we run, right? So talking about direct flight to India probably is a distant future, right? I think increasing the connectivity to the major hubs, especially the Middle Eastern hubs, would be more possible reality in the near future. With your 75 people average, on a daily basis, if you could start just the other gentleman asked for, once or twice a week to the hub connectivity option, right, through the Middle East countries, right? I think the statistics support that, right, at least to the hub connectivity. And what do you need from the community, from us, and how can we develop that plan, right? What can we do to develop that plan, more precise action plan from your side that can help us support that?
Yeah, Yeah, so I think it's going to be data. So who are the companies? Where are they traveling to? Having information, cargo information. All that information is what we're going to wind up collecting as we talk to the carriers. I will tell you, I think there is probably an interest in maybe another connection point in Europe. Maybe there's an opportunity in the Middle East, but not just those 75 people, but what's the growth look like? What are the projections? The airlines don't know what you're going to do from a community standpoint in terms of overall growth and what your businesses are going to do for growth. That information, if you can provide that to us, is invaluable when we have those conversations with the carriers.
I think that's a great opportunity. We have quite a few business leaders here and we have elected officials. We can probably gather that information as well, right? But I think the key is the statistics, the current statistics do support at least once or twice through any of the hubs, right? Middle East hubs are the most favored hubs as per the Indian population is concerned. I can tell you right now, that's a general sentiment, right? Right?
So when you say through a hub, are you talking about a European hub?
No, the Dubai or Doha, Abu Dhabi, one of those hubs.
Oh, through the Middle East?
Yeah, Middle Eastern hubs, right?
Sure. So we will engage those carriers in a conversation. As I said, not too distant future. Again, sharing that information. It's not only the 75, but there's also people going to the Middle East as well that builds that entire package for an interest for a carrier.
And the statistics that you have of 2019, right? So there is a significant growth in population since then of the Indian community here, and there's also people traveling that are of Indian origin, that are parents and relatives and stuff that travel every single day. Right? So I think the statistics might be a little bit off than what you've shown. The current day statistics.
Sir, my name is Srini Sumara. So I just want to add to Suresh, the example for data points around is many of the people travel from here to India connection. They look for the price, also connectivity, number of flights. So adding one flight at the additional cost to the ticket. So many people from Raleigh area, they travel to DC by drive and they can take their families from there because for their parents, it's easy for the connection in Middle East or somewhere, and they don't have a transit visa also. They don't require. But when you go to London and travel here, they need a transit visa. And these are all the challenges that makes parents to travel, shortest number of flights, connectivity, as well as other form of choices they will choose from. So that's the reason, like having at least try 1 or 2 days in a week from here to Middle East connectivity. That way you will see the real numbers. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amar, and I want to thank everybody who has come here and participated in the local survey that we conducted. We have some interesting facts to show to you, and I've already shared it to Mr. Michael. And if we can run the slides quickly, we'll give you a different perspective of what you have seen. Outliers are the people traveling from here to DC are not included in your 75. And example is today there was an emergency, somebody had to book a ticket. They have to drive to DC where they're getting like $1,500. From here is $2,400. The flight is at 8 o'clock right now. So these things are not captured anywhere. So what we have done is we have like 50,000 people that we have represented in the Indian community. But I know that there are 11,000 Nepali community, and then Bangladesh community, Sri Lankan community, and Pakistan community. All put together, we will have around 75,000 people.
That is a great point.
Okay. So quickly, if you can bring up the slides, please. We'll show the numbers and.
So what would be helpful is that if you've got data, which obviously you do, sharing us the data and the sources that we can sit down and understand what that looks like in comparison to what we're looking at, because the data that we're looking at is what the airlines are seeing.
Right.
So the airlines don't have an accurate picture, but that's what we have and what they have. You can help us.
Right.
The way you help us is you share the information with us, and let's sit down and try to understand that. We can do that.
So the two facts I have put together out there is the near term and the long term. Right now, from here to go to the most frequent destination in India, the flight from here to London, London to Hyderabad, you can go. But while coming back, the London to RDU flight comes 15 minutes earlier than the flight coming from India, any of the major destinations. So the top 6 locations that we have found out in our survey, the topmost one is the Hyderabad, and obviously it will people who have filled in the survey has given the data, but when you put together everybody, you would see the British Airways starting from India, reaching to London Heathrow, and then our flight comes back. That's the first step. If we can adjust the timings, you would see inflow of people coming into that London flight. You would see the maximization in its seat capacity. Second, the Air France flight from here to Charles de Gaulle, right? When it goes there, the flight from there to other destinations in India, only 30-40 minutes of gap is there. So if you can adjust these two, immediately it would cover Bombay, Delhi, Mumbai, Delhi, Chennai and Bangalore. But still it doesn't address the Hyderabad, which is the most famous location from here, a lot of residents from here. So please do consider those facts, and I've shared those data points with you. It's only 10% sample.
Yeah, just real quick. Those specifics that you actually had in terms of timing and everything, I know you sent me the PowerPoint presentation, but if you could include that information in an email, is it there? Perfect, thank you.
And I would just say we engage the domestic and the international planners at both Delta and American, so that information is certainly helpful. There are, I would say, London and Paris, they're operating at slot control, so they have certain landing times they have to operate in.
Yeah.
I will also note that through our catchment study, we're actually not just pulling every passenger that starts their journey at RDU. We are actually also, through credit card and booking tickets, we can actually show who start their journey in the RDU area, but do not start their journey out of RDU airport. So we can actually model that when we look at the international markets.
Yeah, the other one is for Emirates and Qatar and all, if they are like delayed coming into RDU, probably you can consider their code partners, American Airlines or United. I put in those flights as well in the last slide. So those two from here to Dubai could be one option if you want to consider. Thank you.
Again, another takeaway from what he said is add up all those countries, right? Not just India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and all these things, right? They're all, once you have hub connectivity, everybody else is going to fly through the same connectivity.
The other suggestion is like, if you see that it's called the triad area, like, Winston-Salem, Greensboro, and moreover in Charlotte too, and Ashburn, and these people. There's a lot of Indian origin, right, to Fayetteville and all these areas. There's a lot of Indian community over there. And they are looking for RDU. If you have any direct flight to any of these hubs, like in the Middle East, that would be great. It's not just only for the Indian origin people. There's like, as everybody said, so Middle East people is Sri Lankan, so like so many people. I bet that so like a flight would fill in no time. But we are looking forward for some good news from you guys. Thank you.
Just to follow up on what the gentleman said. The direct flights to India are mostly from New York. Atlanta does not have it. Chicago has it. DC, on the East Coast, if you really look, we have got the New York and DC. And both of these places tend to become a problem, especially if you are heading to India because of either weather issues during the winter time or just the congestion of traffic in the New York area. More often than not, we miss our connections. More often than not, none of our baggages end up reaching the destination. Okay? So my question to you was, if we create an alternate destination from Raleigh, the people who are in adjoining states, who today don't have any other option but to go to these places where we face hardship, I'm sure many of them will be looking at RDU as an option where weather doesn't become a hindrance, and if we could have connectivity either to Europe or to Middle East, that should also increase some of the transitioning passengers from other states that would like to avoid going to these major hubs. I personally don't like to go through JFK or Newark or Chicago. If I'm flying to Europe, I go through either Cincinnati. I hate Atlanta as well, right? Because you don't have, as Vimalji pointed out, the customer service available there. You are not treated as if you are a human being in many cases. But it's essentially the trouble is not worth going through those airports. We would rather prefer paying a little bit extra and going through smaller airports.
Even sometimes we have to fly to Fort Lauderdale and come back to RDU. That time I feel like, why can't we get a direct stop in RDU? Like, everybody has the same thing, right? We're getting extra time of journey to Fort Lauderdale, back to like 4 hours and waiting there, and coming back to 2 hours RDU. So that's the kind of speed everybody has.
One more point is, because of this inconvenience, people, though they want to travel often, they don't travel because they have to connect and they have to go through all these points. That discourages them from traveling up. They would love to go frequently every year, but they don't because they don't want to go to all these airports. So I think there's a lot of opportunity potential across Asian community here. They all can get into those, at least one of these hubs. And please look into it.
A couple more questions, a couple more. We gotta wrap it up.
Shadi, you have a question?
Well, it was an excellent presentation and the data points and all, but I have a question. In your presentation you said every day almost 75 people fly out of RDU to India, the eastern location. But that 75 people go mostly to other airports. And why can't RDU explore that by creating a direct service like to help or direct service like other passengers come, like for example New York. How many New Yorkers like do they cost 75 people? New Yorkers fly out of New York to India or anywhere? No. It can't be done. All people from everywhere converge into New York and fly over from there. So that's how the aircraft gets full. Why don't RDU explore that opportunity and bring the passengers here and fly over from here so that all the aircraft will be full? I mean, that was my question. Why don't you explore that opportunity?
So RDU, without having with an airline hub and just having a focus city, we have to solely do our business cases on what's happening in the RDU catchment. So we don't see connections beyond RDU like you can do in New York and in Washington, right? So they can support some of those daily flights in the low season or the high season. They can add more frequencies because they're ultimately distributing the traffic across the entire US. So that's just one of the metrics that we have to look at when we're analyzing that. And of course, our modeling with Emirates is absolutely correct. We're then not just looking at India, we're looking at the entire Middle East, we're looking at all the way to Thailand, we're looking at Israel. Now Emirates is connecting Israel direct to Dubai 7 times a day. So there's lots of different things that in an Emirates discussion will then have lots of different traffic that we can do that because the UAE population is very small. They just are very lucky that they are building this massive hub with lots of large populations that are moving for business and leisure passengers all around them.
Yeah, this is going to be the last question. Sure.
Last question.
Okay. So I want to piggyback on what Satish mentioned about how community can partner, right? Like you said, you guys need to talk to the business leader. But we want to know the number, like how many tickets that you need. I'm sure it all runs through the business of tickets or first class tickets. If we run that kind of a business model, that's when the coach classes doesn't really matter that much. But we want to know more on the, I know you said you need to talk to each individual corporate, how the business drives, how many cases of travel that you might need, right, to come up with some kind of a solution. But we wanted to know real quantifiable number that's, from the business side. So that way we can really, from the community side, we can come out and promise you that, okay, this is what we have, and we purchase it well in advance. Can we kind of get the solution?
So some fun math for you. So if you have a 275 passenger aircraft, right? And that aircraft can fly literally anywhere in the world, and they can have a full airplane. If they go to China or some other place, that's who you're going to compete with. So do 275, and maybe a 90% of that number times 7 days a week, 365 days out of the year. That's what you're competing with on an international basis. There is stiff competition for those airplanes that are out there. It's a large number.
That 275 number might be like already aggregated with all the attractions, right? Like coach as well as the business class.
Whole thing. But here's what they've got. That airplane is positioned some other place in the world where it's running full. So why would they take it out of a market where they're running full and come to your market where you're only going to fill out first class?
No, they need more.
You got to fill the airplane.
Last question, and we're going to wrap it up. He's got to go.
Okay. Excellent presentation, and thanks for all the data points. And I think it gives the real picture for the whole community, also for us to think through in terms of the next steps, basically. But I think in terms of you guys being running the airport, you might have seen already some success stories, like us, what kind of business case we have. Similar big business cases might be there for you, running direct flights to China or some other locations, basically, where a significant population here also. I would like to see, like, kind of, I know, like, kind of some real numbers are 275 times 365 is like 100,000 or something like that per year. But if there is, or if there any middle way point, like kind of where we can work with the businesses, like kind of companies like IBM or Red Hat or these kind of things, have you seen or like have any success stories like that where we can follow that kind of path, or like where we can reach out these companies to see how we can get a direct flight?
Yeah, so if we want to develop kind of a coalition of businesses in the local community, that we can invite some of those companies, like the Red Hats of the world, and see what their future demand is going to look like. Absolutely. I mean, that's what this is all about. This is starting the conversation, having a dialogue, of trying to get as much synergies as we can. There's people in South Carolina, you know who those folks are, those companies, we need to know that. We can work collectively together to try to get as many groups of people together to sell that story. But we only know what we know. If you've got information we don't, you can help us. So engage us in the conversation is what we need to try to do.
Thank you all very much. Let's give a round of applause for the panel. We're going to wrap up. First of all, I want to let's give a round of applause for Manoj and Hindustan, North Carolina for a great job. The other thing is we want to ask NCAIA real quickly, Sakir, if you could just come give a vote of thanks to the community. They also help promote this event. I want to thank all of our special guests, Ashok Kumar, Ryan Combs, the airport CEO, Michael Rangoth, and his team, Mr. Kalapa, Satish, everybody that was here. Just a wonderful, wonderful turnout. And then I'm going to close it out.
Thank you, everybody, the panelists, for coming on Thursday night and spending with us. That's one of the greatest presentations that we have had for so long. So we have really good information. We have to take home with all that good info where we could participate and help you out with some of the pledges and the support that you have framed up in your presentation. So we'll work from that side of it, along with the survey that Amar has provided us. So we'll extend that. I think we have some takeaways, what we will work on. But before that, I think this is the first and initial state where we have expressed our concerns, as well as what RDU has given us to take home. So we'll have, as a community, we all have to work together and then bring it to a better closure that within a year or two, I don't know how much time it takes for a flight to start off, we just have to aggressively campaign for this. So thank you everyone for coming in today, and the elected officials and the panelists, as well as Hindu Bhavan, on behalf of NCAIA, thank you for coming in and making it a great presentation and a lively event for today. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.